Chapter 40. In the Bois Caïman, Saint-Domingue, August 1791. The forest felt alive in a way that unsettled him. Adolphe had never known the feeling of being engulfed by trees like this, where the world felt so hidden from the sky. The plantations were cleared orderly and stripped of their wilderness, but here the trees braided together in wild tangles like a mangled cathedral buttress, black against a dark violet sky. Thick vines dangled like serpents from gnarled branches, and the dense undergrowth whispered as unseen creatures scurried through the leaves. Being surrounded by darkness of this magnitude felt like being swallowed whole. They could not bring torches at risk of being discovered, and the moonlight only barely peeked through to illuminate the ground at their feet. Shadows ensnared everything around them with clawed talons. He wondered if this was where Cécile's loas hid from the Christian soldiers. They had been walking for nearly 2 hours, the night wrapping tighter around them with every step. And yet Adolphe worried it wasn't deep enough. Not for what they were doing. He had spent 5 days trying to ready himself since Cécile's visit at Cormier, but nothing could prepare him for this. Victoria led silently at the front while Jean-Jacques and a handful of trustworthy friends followed in uneasy quiet. Adolphe walked closely behind, his ears straining for sounds of danger beyond the ceaseless droning of insects. Each step away from the plantation felt both liberating and terrifying. He had never left the plantation without permission before. Now each cautious step into the forest felt like a rebellion against his entire life. Here, in the untamed dark, he was free. No white person alive knew where he was, but only for a night. Going back before dawn would be agony, but that was a problem for the morning. Tonight, he tiptoed towards destiny. Their little band pressed forward in silence, their bare feet squelching into the damp earth. At one point, Jean-Jacques grabbed Adolphe's shoulder, his eyes wide with hushed anxiety. They could still turn back. For a moment, Adolphe hesitated, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in around them. Then he shook it off with a stiff shrug, anchoring himself in a foolhardy confidence he knew was a fallacy. His feet ached, and his clothes were damp from the scattered rains. Yet the promise of Bois Caïman pulsed louder in his mind with every step. His stomach fluttered at the thought of seeing Cécile again, but even more, he yearned to witness for himself why Dutty Boukman had become the people's savior. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the thick Caribbean air. Everyone froze mid-step, fear thundering in their chests. Adolphe's eyes darted through the twisted trees, expecting to see guards emerge with raised muskets and dogs baring their teeth. But then Jean-Jacques lifted his foot sheepishly from a thick, broken twig. Adolphe's shoulders sagged with relief as they scanned the tree line for any sign of patrols. Thankfully, there was nothing. The forest remained still and quiet, its secrets hidden in darkness. Slowly, they released their held breaths, and their march continued through the shadows. Finally, far ahead in the humid night, a low murmur vibrated above the incessant chorus of chirping insects and rustling leaves. Victoria raised her hand and signaled them to halt. Her dark eyes flashed as she slipped forward alone into the shadows, her silhouette vanishing between thick tree trunks. The rest of them were left crouched in tense silence to wait for news about whether the noises were from friend or foe. Adolphe's thoughts flickered to Cécile. Was she safe? Would she be happy to see him? Victoria was gone for 5 excruciating minutes before she marched triumphantly through the trees and approached them at full volume. "Gentlemen, "We have arrived," she called brightly, though Adolphe noticed that she still held a large stick in her grasp, just in case things took a turn for the worse. They rose and followed Victoria through the dense undergrowth, ducking under fallen branches and brushing aside thick-leafed vines. Sweat slid down their backs, and insects swarmed their faces, but none of it mattered. Their feet felt light despite the treacherous ground, their hearts drummed with excitement. As they drew closer, hushed but energized voices revealed a crowd of well over 200 in the clearing. Never in his life had he seen so many black and mixed people gathered together, apart from public executions or Catholic Mass. Those gatherings were controlled by the whites. No, this meeting thrummed with something deeper, something dangerous, forbidden, and powerful. It felt as though Cecile's Loas themselves breathed through the clearing, calling every man and woman there towards a destiny far greater than mere survival. And as Adolphe stepped into that clearing, something ancient stirred awake within his soul. He looked around the gathering. There were so many men and women, and they all looked vastly different. He could tell there were people who were newer to the island, as well as those who had long since assimilated. Some spoke softly in languages from distant coasts. Others whispered in Creole or French. Yet something connected them beyond just the color of their flesh. It was like an immortal tether that wove them into a single tapestry that transcended time, suffering, and continent. Perhaps this was the voodoo spirit, the ancestral force permeating the clearing, connecting even those who had never practiced its arts. Somehow, this suppressed piece of their age-old culture cut through the boundaries of language, tribe, or anything else the whites had tried to rewrite within them. Adolphe scanned the crowd desperately for Cécile and found her right near the heart of the gathering, standing next to a man he could only assume was Dutty Boukman. The man wore a deep red African robe. His long dreadlocks were tied back as flickering shadows from the fire danced across his face, making him seem almost beyond human, as if he fell out of myth or legend. Cécile caught his gaze and gestured him forward. He and the others pressed closer until they stood within feet of the enigmatic leader of the Maroons. Adolphe reached out to embrace her. "I ditched Pierrot," she whispered quickly in his ear. "He's lurking somewhere like a brooding crow. I'm so glad you came. I needed to see you today." "Is everything all right?" Adolphe asked consolingly. Yes, it's fine. I just got in another fight with Lulu and Henri before I left. Together, they're so impossibly stubborn and ignorantly pious. They think voodoo is devil worship, nothing more. They refuse to understand. But when I was about to give in, I thought of you and the courage you mustered to be here tonight. Knowing what you've overcome reminded me that even when some of our own people don't stand with us, there are others who will. Compliments made Adolphe uncomfortable, so he let her words slip past, focusing instead on the itinerary for the evening. "Will there be a lot of voodoo tonight?" he asked quietly, eager and uncertain all at once. She smiled softly, her eyes shimmering with torchlight. "Adolphe, don't you see? We're living it." For a moment, he felt the words settle over him, seeping into his bones. Before he could respond, the murmurs all around them fell hushed. Boukman had moved to stand on a tall crate, signaling he was about to start. He did have a mystic sort of majesty, but Adolphe was close enough to see that he was absolutely flesh and bone. Boukman raised his arms high, commanding silence. His voice boomed through the clearing, rough as gravel and fierce as thunder. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "gathered here tonight in the shadows of these venerable trees, we hold united in our struggle against the shackles of oppression that have bound us for far too long. The blood of Vincent Auger cries out from Mother Earth, demanding justice. We can no longer live as slaves under the tyrannical yoke of the whites. The time for action is at hand. Adolphe felt each syllable jolt through his bones. Boukman's words carried the weight of centuries of suffering and resistance, braided into a single voice strong enough to split the sky. Boukman's eyes blazed as he spoke. We are a people, so numerous on this island, yet forced to live as if we are alone, divided by laws and lies. But we are not alone. We are many. Our ancestors rise with us tonight. The Loa spirits of Africa are here to instruct us. We call upon them for strength and protection in the fight ahead. A murmur of assent rose around Adolphe. Near him, Adolphe noticed a familiar face. Dina's cousin. He was being embraced by a young woman who had tears streaming down her cheeks. Adolphe recognized the desperation in the woman's eyes, but he also sensed a flicker of cautious hope, the most terrifying emotion a black person could experience in Saint-Domingue. Boukman's voice lowered, rumbling with grim certainty. For centuries, our bodies have been broken and our spirits crushed beneath the weight of chains, forged in the fires of greed and cruelty. But no more. We will not be silent witnesses to our own destruction, nor will we meekly accept the indignity of servitude thrust upon us by those who seek to profit from our suffering. We are the descendants of kings and queens, warriors and scholars, stolen from our homes. Adolphe held Cécile close. She looked up at him and smiled. Do you feel anything? The Loa? He nodded in astonishment. I feel everything. Listen closely, my brothers and sisters, Boukman continued. For I speak not only with the voice of one man, but from the knowledge of our ancestors and the books stolen from the deserts of Timbuktu. Auger's sacrifice must not be in vain. His blood, like the blood of so many before him, has watered the tree of freedom. We must rise up and fight for our liberty. The whites have tried to break us, to crush our spirit, but they have failed. We are stronger, far stronger than they know. Hiding in the clouds, their white god watches us and sees our misery, but he does nothing. But our gods, the Loa spirits who made the sun, who bring us light from above, who raise the sea and who make the storm rumble, their voices cry out in passion and rage. Throw away the image of the god of the whites who thirsts for our tears. Listen to the liberty that speaks in all our hearts. The goddess Erzuli orders us to take vengeance. She will direct our hands and give us aid. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Adolphe shivered and turned to Cécile. Now I understand what everyone sees in him. Boukman lifted his hands high as he chanted, bomba, kanga, bafiote, kanga moone dele. The crowd roared their reply with devotion and rage. Adolphe felt a shiver run down his spine. He could taste the fire that burned within each of them, electrifying everyone gathered into a powerful, unified force of nature itself. Together, Boukman cried, his voice rising above the drums and chants. Let us march forth into history as champions of our people, heralds of freedom, and griots of our own destiny. We will strike fear into the hearts of those who have harmed our fathers, our mothers, and our children. We will reclaim our dignity, our lives, and our land. This is our time. We will rewrite history. Our revolution begins here. Adolphe felt the power of those words grip onto his soul. For the first time in his adult life, he was more than just a man surviving. He stood trembling on the threshold of history. Boukman paused, lowering his arms. and his voice deepened in sober command. "But know this. Our retribution cannot begin with the dawn. We must be patient and strategic. The time of our uprising will come soon, but we must be prepared. Spread the word discreetly, gather your strength, and be ready when the moment arrives." The order was almost disappointing. Adolphe felt so impassioned he wanted to begin fighting that very night. In the span of 20 minutes, he had been imbued with centuries of knowledge, and now he had to wait? But at the same time, he understood why. A crowd of 200 may seem huge in an empty wood, but Auger had more than that and lost. They required more people. They needed time to spread the word, to gather weapons, and to calculate their attack perfectly. Cécile turned to Adolphe excitedly. "Now it's my turn," she whispered seductively before stepping forward into the crowd. She raised her arms. "The Loa recognize the supreme chief of the rebellion." Her words resonated with authority. From within her satchel, she withdrew a scepter unlike anything Adolphe had seen before. It was deep crimson from blade to tip, wrapped tightly in dyed cloth and adorned with beadwork that shimmered in the firelight. Tiny cowrie shells lined its length in swirling patterns, and tufts of feathers crowned its top. It seemed less a weapon than a living emblem of ancient royalty, palpitating with unseen power. She lifted it theatrically above Boukman's bowed head, then lowered it onto his shoulders, one side and then the other. Victoria began to beat the drum with rhythms deeper than memory and older than words. The rising sounds merged with the flickering shadows and the smell of sweat and rain-soaked earth. The entire forest held its breath as Cécile pressed the scepter into Boukman's chest and declared, "May Ogou's might guide your arm, and Ezili's motherly fury drive your heart." Boukman let out a guttural undulation, and the crowd echoed. The drumbeats quickened, and with that, Cécile began to dance, her limbs painting artistic patterns into the thicket. Each step felt religious, her body radiating in harmony with the pulsing rhythm. Adolphe watched in awe as Cécile transformed into a woman he wasn't certain he recognized. Perhaps it was the glow of the fires surrounding them, but Adolphe could have sworn that Cécile's emerald eyes had changed to ruby, ablaze with a fierce intensity that signaled a communion with forces beyond the mortal realm. She unsheathed the saber blade from its crimson covering, the metal reflecting magical rays of light into the darkest corners of the forest. Her steps encircled a huge black hog. It was odd. Until that moment, Adolphe hadn't even noticed the hog's presence, which was strange because it was not a small animal. It was as if the beast had appeared out of the darkness, conjured by the Loa just for this moment. With a swift and decisive motion, Cécile plunged the blade into the throat of the pig. Its squeals tore through the night air. The sacrifice had begun, an offering to Erzuli. A halved coconut caught the blood as it streamed from the slaughtered hog's neck. The red liquid cascaded over Cécile's fingers and down her forearm as she held the earthen chalice high before passing it around the gathering. Adolphe wasn't quite sure what to do with it, so he observed those around him for guidance. But their choices varied. Some pressed it to their lips and drank like they were at Mass, but Jesus' blood had always seemed much more grape-based. Others smeared the blood across their foreheads and chests like war paint. He wasn't sure if it was for blessings or protection, but as each drop of blood was passed around, the people made a solemn oath, a pledge of allegiance to the cause of Black freedom and liberation. Take the blood and hold the secret. The thick, humid air tingled with the energy of ancient rites and powerful magic as each participant joined in the defiant dance. Cecile's voice rose above the pounding drums. "Those who partake in this communion shall be shielded by the guardians of our past, guided by their wisdom of our ancestors, and fortified by the strength of our collective spirit. Those who break this oath shall die a traitor's death." Just then, as the ceremony reached its zenith, a sudden bolt of lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the darkness with a blinding flash. Thunder followed, crashing through the forest with a roar that shook the earth beneath their feet. The crowd gasped in awe at nature's power. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the world quivered in terrible wonder. "Behold, my sisters and brothers," Cecile cried. "The spirits have spoken. They have given their blessing to our righteous cause, and they shall lead our path to victory." The crowd's cheers rose into a storm-torn night. The drumbeats quickened until the forest throbbed with the rhythm of war. Boukman stepped forward again, his dreadlocks whipping in the storm winds. "The hour of our liberation is at hand," he thundered. "But heed me closely, my people. This will only succeed if we can maintain the element of surprise. In exactly 2 weeks' time, at sundown, we shall unleash the fires of revolution upon this land. We shall burn Saint-Domingue to ash and drag every slaver to the depths of hell." He opened his hands to the sky, letting Mother Earth drench his face in her tears of righteous rage. He stood there for a moment, as more and more people surrendered to the Loa around them. Then he lowered his chin and, somehow, looked all 200 people straight in their eyes. "Swear to me now, swear you will keep this secret, that you will stand together as one until victory is ours." They pounded their fists against their chests. Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. Again and again the rhythm grew, a thunderous heartbeat of revolution pulsing through their bodies, echoing the rain that hammered the earth and the lightning that sizzled in the sky with feral joy. Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. Adolphe stood trembling as the chants and drumbeats echoed around him. The hog's blood that he had smeared on his forehead was now dripping between his eyelashes in the rain. But he wouldn't blink. He couldn't take his eyes off Cecile, her dreadlocks soaked and heavy, wrapping themselves and spraying an incredible cascade of water around her fierce, beautiful face as she danced in the storm. The lightning had changed the color of the sky to almost lavender, which illuminated her in ghostly silver. She looked like a goddess, descended to call forth the freedom of their people. As he stared at her, he realized something very deep and visceral within himself. They were no longer at Cormier. There was no shame here, no suffering. There was only energy. He reached for her hand, gripping it with a trembling urgency. She raised a playful eyebrow and grabbed him at the shoulders, pulling him into her dance. But instead of swaying, he stopped. Halted by him, she looked up into his eyes. Everything around them was pulsing and moving, but in the center of it all, the two of them stood completely still, just captivated by each other. Then he pulled her into a kiss that held the depth of 1,000 years of kisses, and the passions of loves torn apart and united again. She bit his lip, and he could taste the metallic blood falling onto his tongue. He didn't know if it was his or the hog's. "I need you," he whispered into her ear. She dug her lips in deeper. Their mouths did not part again. As he kissed her, he began backing up, pulling her through the dripping shadows, away from the chanting throng and the fevered drums, deeper into the dark embrace of the forest. The downpour swallowed them in its deafening hush, washing away every chain that had ever bound him. There, amid the mud and roots, their bodies moved to its own primal dance. All alone, wet with rain and fervor, drenched with mud, and impassioned with revolution.